77CK Princeton.
All right, we're at 4 minutes now past the hour of 8 o'clock, and it's time now for our Tiger Talk morning show. And I have the pleasure of welcoming into the WPKY studios the former editor, publisher of the Times Leader here in Princeton, Chip Hutcheson. How are you, sir?
Doing fine this morning.
Pleasure having you in the WPKY studio.
Well, it's great being here. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you and listeners, and we'll just have a good time of reminiscing maybe.
I hope so. And is this the first time you've been in studio since?
This is the first time in the studio at its present location. I've been in it several times
Right.
at the downtown, but yes, first time here. It's nice operation.
Thank you. Hope the air feels good in here. Sometimes when the sun comes through these windows, it's a little unforgiving in the control room sometimes.
We've got the same problem, or did have at the Times Leader. Those front windows, you all face the same way that we do, and it does get hot. But no, it's early morning. We're good.
All right, sounds great. Well, just welcome into, and of course, as it's been covered in the press, recent retirement from Times Leader after many years, and just an illustrious career, a wonderful career for you, and just wanted to kind of touch base with you about that, kind of reflect. We'll go back and we'll start first about on your background, and we'll work our way back up to the retirement, some of the things you're going to be involved in as we move into the future. So let's first talk about your background. Of course, you're a hometown guy,
Right.
Love of sports and things, and tell us a little bit about how your interest. I remember when I first moved here in the 80s, I used to see you in the old Princeton Leader office, working the press and around town. But tell us about your background growing up here with your parents and then into the newspaper business.
Okay, glad to. Yes, my parents moved here when I was about 10 months old, and they moved to Princeton and bought the Princeton Leader from Grayson Pedley, who was the father of the late Jack Pedley, and did not know anyone other than the Pedleys here in Princeton when they moved here. They were not from here. My mother was from just outside of Lexington in the little town of Midway, and my dad was from Corbin, and he was editor of the Pineville Sun. And when this opportunity arose to buy the Princeton Leader, very interesting, Mr. Pedley was a groomsman in my mother's father, my grandfather on my mother's side, in his wedding.
Wow.
So that's how that family connection arose, and that's how they knew that the paper could be purchased. So they bought the paper in 1949, and of course, worlds different about how newspaper was produced in that era.
Right.
Worked hard. My mom and dad both worked hard in that. I grew up in the newspaper office, and
Right.
From the time I was 8 years old, I just liked to hang around there. And by the time I was in high school, I decided I would try my hand at writing, and so because I always had a great love of sports and enjoyed writing, reporting on the Little League and AAA and Pony League. Those were the three leagues initially, and of course then they added some other leagues, the Lassie League. But did that in high school, worked at the paper during my summers during my high school years when I wasn't playing golf.
Right.
And then went off to college at UK and came home every summer and worked there at the paper, at the Leader, every summer for those 4 years. When I got out of UK, when I graduated, I thought, well, I'm not going to be able to get a job anywhere. I really wanted to work for the Courier Journal, which at that time, of course, sports coverage was just phenomenal.
Sure.
With the Courier Journal. They had some of the greatest sports journalists you would ever
Probably
find.
Kentucky's largest newspaper as well, wasn't it?
It
Pretty
was
much?
by far the
Yeah.
largest newspaper in the state, and it was of course, the Bingham family owned it
Right.
at that time, and they prided themselves on being the statewide newspaper, and they were circulated in all 120 counties, and had a very aggressive marketing plan in that regard, and Earl Cox was the executive sports editor, and I had gotten to know Earl through my coverage of UK sports. And Earl told me, he said, Chip, I would love to hire you, but Uncle Sam's going to get you first. And so I joked that I won the lottery in 1970, and that's when the lottery was not when you win money. That's when you win 2 years with Uncle Sam.
Right.
And so I fully expected to be drafted. But I was asked to interview at the Kentucky New Era in Hopkinsville, which at that time was a 6-day daily, as their sports editor. And they agreed to hire me, knowing that I may well be drafted and probably would be drafted. And my dad encouraged me to take that job in his wisdom, knowing that I would learn more working for somebody else than I would working for family. And that certainly proved to be true. But I went to work a week after I graduated from UK. I went to work at the New Era, but I was able to enlist in the Army Reserve.
Okay.
And that meant instead of 2 years, I went to basic training in AIT at Fort Polk, Louisiana. They kept my job open for me, so I returned to Hopkinsville. And there I met my wife. She lived in the apartment building next to the building where I was living in. Met her in the parking lot. She was coming home from work. She had worked the 11 to 7 shift at Jenny Stewart. She was an RN, and I was just going to work. So I joked that she pestered me enough until we went out on a date, but in reality, I pestered her enough, and I just I would not take no for an answer, and we had our first date in August of 1972, and then we're married in April of 1973. So it didn't take us very long once we decided, once we went out. But I continued there. Our daughter Cindy was born there in 1976. 3 months later, we think back on, I really don't know how it worked out. But my dad was not in the best of health and was just weary of all those years. And I was ready for a new challenge. And so we just decided, well, we'd come back here, took over the operation of the Princeton Leader in August of 1976. And it's been a great time. I was there until 1992 when I sold the Leader, and the Lowell and Louise Hobby sold the Caldwell County Times to the New Era. And then the New Era, the agreement was that I would manage it. We put both papers together and made it twice weekly instead of both papers coming out on Wednesday.
Right.
And so it's just, the Lord was certainly in all of that situation, because it's been a great opportunity for me.
Sure. And you mentioned growing up in the newspaper office, and I think that's how it happens. Of course, it was your family business, but it just sort of gets in your blood, where you got to smell that ink, and you got to meet those deadlines, and then you get that love for writing, and then the next thing you know, you're right in the midst of it. And it's been a fabulous career for you, hasn't it?
It has, and we joke about that. There are not as many offspring of newspaper people going into the business now. I know that, of course, Cindy worked for me. She started as an 8th grader, working at the Leader office, and worked for me up to, even though she was majored in accounting, she's a CPA. She worked summers for me several years during her college years. But the greatest relief that Cindy and John Mark had is when I sold the paper, and they knew they didn't have to take it over. They knew they didn't have to go into the business, because they had other
plans,
ambitions.
Other ambitions.
But yes, it's been a great career. Of course, seeing incredible changes in technology and just in the culture and the environment. Great changes in Princeton, but it has been a fantastic career. This community is a great place to have a newspaper. It has always supported. People they marveled when I told them that prior to 1992 that there were 2 competing weeklies in a town of 6,300 people. We went out head to head every Wednesday morning, and both of us did well, and both of us had great support from the community. That was so unheard of, even in that era. Certainly unheard of today for a town this size.
That is really hard to believe when you think about it. And I didn't. Just thinking back, there were 2 like that, and you were competing for the same advertising dollars, the same stories, and then we had a radio station here as well.
Right.
And we always have been kind of friendly competitors, but yet there is room for both, and they complement each other pretty well. And that's what's so great, I think, is it's nice to have that relationship with the newspaper, and it's very important.
Yeah, it sure is. And, go back to the days of, when Willie Wilson was here back when I was 8,
Yes.
10 years old, and my parents and Willie, and they were great friends, competitors, but yet great friends, had great respect for each other. With Twyman, we always had a good time joking around with Twyman, but Twyman was great to work with.
Yes.
And the good thing about it is that while we were competitors, yet we all had great respect for each other, and everybody treated each other fairly.
Yes.
Nobody did anything, underhanded, or we always spoke well of each other.
Yes.
And that's the way life should be. And I'm thankful that is the way it is here now. We want everyone to succeed. There's a
Definitely.
place for everybody.
There is, and this is such a great, tight-knit community in every which way. If we all work together, we're just better off, I think.
Yeah, I agree, and that cooperation and that just being good friends and good neighbors and good citizens pays great rewards.
No doubt about it. In your many years in doing this business, especially the newspaper business, lots of challenges. We see large newspapers, with the internet, with social media. It affects radio as well. But give us your thoughts as you've seen the newspaper business evolve. Let's get into kind of the technical aspects of that and see where you see some small town newspapers, maybe even large town newspapers going with into the future. What do you see?
It's very interesting, the media dynamics today. We see especially on the national scene, with all the downplaying of the effect of media and the fake news scenarios that we see, and what we always do in the associations that I have and the people that I know, we truly try to distinguish ourselves from the large papers. Many times we don't particularly agree with the way they do things, but we refer to ourselves as community journalists.
Mm-hmm.
And community journalism still has a great role.
Yes.
And that, I think that applies to not just newspapers, but to radios as well.
Sure.
But where you're involved in the community, where the people that you report on, you look at face to face all the time, and you're not viewed as adversaries. Now, there are sometimes, of course, sometimes involving governmental situations that it may look adversarial,
right.
But it's not. We all are in the same. We all have the same goals. We just might not. They might not appear to be that way
right.
sometimes. But the papers, and people say, "Well, I hear the newspaper business is dying," and I will tell people I'm a newspaper publisher, and they'll sometimes in the past few years they say, "Well, I'm sorry." So, well, don't be sorry, because our business, our paper is doing well, has a good name, and you look at the community newspapers across the country, they're solid.
Yeah.
And the problems that the community newspapers, those in that genre, which have had problems, are those who are owned by large chains that really don't make good community decisions.
Right.
And this community has been very blessed, because when the New Era purchased the two papers here and asked me to be the manager to run the operation here, they gave me complete autonomy. I mean, it was just like I owned the newspaper.
Yeah, and of course, your experience. I mean, they knew that if they gave you the keys to it, it was going to be okay.
Well, and I appreciate that trust they had, because I will tell you, it's not that way with most newspaper companies today. Because I hear the horror stories from some of my friends who are in other states that have that situation, but they did trust me to know what was best for this community, and I've always been appreciative of that.
Fantastic. Let's stay on the newspaper just a few more minutes, because I want to compliment your many years of, I loved your column, Chips Off the Old Block, and I read your last one, talking about, don't know what I was going to, the last one I write, and then let's talk about who's at the paper now, and you've got Jared as your editor now. You've got a fantastic staff of writers. You've got a great advertising, and of course you have the printing department. So the thing that I've noticed about the operation over there is that there's no turnover. People are happy working there, and you've got such a fantastic staff. Let's brag on them a few minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I do, and that has allowed me to do so many things in recent years because I could leave town for different meetings and different responsibilities and never fear that things were going to go haywire. I always knew it was in good shape. And yes, Jared Nelson has taken my place, and Jared is graduated with my son, but Jared worked for us, then left for a little while, came back 15 years ago, and has been there. He actually was an intern, then left, and he got his degree from Murray State University in journalism. Jared is a brilliant young man.
He is.
I joke with people, but this is true. He's a whole lot smarter than I am. I just had a little bit of experience on him. But Jared will do an excellent job. He has done an incredible job of building respect in this community because he's reported on city council, fiscal court, school board, does all the crime reporting, and people know that he will be fair to them, and that is the key. I've had so many people tell me on complicated subjects about how he makes it easy to understand.
Yes.
And so does a great job. I do want to mention Ellen Franklin, that was my business manager. Ellen retired last September and was a guiding force there at the newspaper. When I left, she was the one in charge and always made great business decisions.
Yes.
And retired because of her husband needed a liver transplant. So that responsibility necessitated her retiring. But she certainly has been missed. But we've got Stacy Mincer, does a great job of reporting. She's our lifestyles editor, but does much more than lifestyles editors at other newspapers do, and has great community involvement. I think have had the best sports editor in the state in Todd Griffin.
No doubt. I mean, I got to work with Todd in radio years ago. He's a year younger than I am, but we worked in radio together. And when Todd takes something on, he does it right.
Right.
And that's what's so. And then his work ethic and his talent, it's just fantastic. I couldn't agree.
Yeah, it's real interesting. When Todd started to work for us, he began working like that was when we still developed film. He was working in the dark room doing those, and Joey Randolph was the sports editor, and Joey
was a fine job.
Did a great job. And when Joey decided to leave, moved to Evansville, took a job with Synergy, Todd had started to help out in some in sports. It was only natural to put him into that role. Somebody with no camera training. He didn't know anything about camera except here's how you put the film in and take it. He just has that God-given ability to take great photos, and he is by far the best sports editor who takes pictures in this state. There's no one that can rival him in that.
Yeah.
And he is self-taught pretty much on what he does, but he has great passion for Caldwell County sports.
He does.
And of course, UK sports as well, but he
St. Louis Cardinals.
loves that. In St. Louis Cardinals, he lives it. He eats, sleeps, and breathes sports, and that's what makes him so valuable. I've got other great folks. I don't want to miss anybody, but Sherry McGregor handles the majority of our advertising. Kayla Stevenson helps some with that. We've got Debbie Frisch, who now is in our front office. Debbie's been there about that same amount of time, 15 to 17 years. And she, after Ellen's departure, she does a great job. She's very quiet, but is incredibly productive.
Yes.
Kathy Boyd has just retired on me. She retired the same day I did, and she's probably dying now that I'm mentioning her on the radio, but she handled all of our circulation and did a superb job there. We have Sheila Brennan, who does a myriad tasks there, and Sheila came to me from a retail background, and yet has learned so much, much of it dealing with computers and working with photos. Have Ralph Sharp, who everybody in town knows. Ralph does a variety of tasks, but you'll see him delivering the papers, works some in our printing department. And then we have also in our printing department Willie McGregor and Bert Thompson. Those are the two primary people. They do probably 98%, 99% of the printing
Do a
work.
fantastic job as well.
Do a great job. We just Jared actually hired Dakota Young to help out on a part-time basis in reporting, and he'll probably be adding another person at some point in time. Not right now.
Good deal.
But I think he's going to wait and just test the waters and see where he thinks he needs a little bit more help and what specific job description.
Well, kudos to those folks. I know they've made your life a whole lot easier as you have traveled. We'll segue into that here in just a few minutes. But congratulations to Jared and the entire staff. What a fantastic job it is. It's nice to grab that paper on Wednesday and Saturdays, and fantastic job by that staff. Let's talk about, now that you talked about being away, you've been involved in many things, not only through your journalism career, but let's talk about some of those organizations that you've been involved with as far as journalism is concerned, but you also have another life, and that is with the Southern Baptist Convention and some of the things there. So let's talk about some of your activities outside the newspaper.
Okay. Well, yes, in newspaper, and thankfully I've had an incredibly supportive wife and family who has allowed me to chase my dreams. And my wife has been so supportive, even times that she would think, "You've got to be crazy. What are you doing?" But I remember I was asked in 2008 to start a newspaper in Oak Grove by our parent company, because they said we don't have anybody else in the company that knows how to do that from a weekly perspective. And so I had 2.5 weeks to put together a new newspaper over there, and my wife looked at me like, "You have got to be kidding me." And I told her, I said, "I'm just ready for one more challenge." And but she never complained, and so completely supportive. But we got involved in National Newspaper Association. I was appointed to that board as an at-large board member in 2005, and then moved. I love the work of that, and that's mostly community newspapers. Weeklies, small dailies, 2,400 newspapers. Was able to stay involved in that, was president of that a couple of years ago, and afforded us great opportunities to not just travel across the country, but to meet
a lot of people.
Incredible folks. And I joke, who would have ever thought somebody here, it's really mind-boggling, from Princeton, Kentucky, and here I got to shake hands with 3 presidents. Got in the White House one time. That was, of course, pre-9/11, when it was a little bit easier to do. But got to a little informal gathering, about 100 of us there, and spent a couple of hours in the White House.
Wow.
And in some of our governmental affairs conferences, heard the likes of Colin Powell. I got to introduce at some of our sessions Newt Gingrich, Rudy Giuliani, just a number of senators of high profile, and got to know Mitch McConnell fairly well, and his wife Elaine Chao. Asked her to speak at one of our sessions, and she came in. People talk about the great politician Mitch McConnell is. Well, I'll tell you, his wife is no slouch, because she came into the meeting and talked about she was proud to be from Kentucky, and you would have thought I was her best friend.
Isn't that something?
And I met her then several years later when they were on a campaign swing through Princeton, and there was a little function here. And I walked up to her, and she said, "Well, hi, Chip, how are you doing?" And I thought, I don't know whether she has that great a memory, and a Happy Chandler type memory, or whether somebody was there prompting her, telling her the
she had a little ear thing in.
But I thought, how in the world did she remember my name after several years?
That's impressive.
So that was great. But and that allowed me opportunity to see people, and you see these high-profile politicians on TV, but yet when you talk with them, Some of them are much more cordial than you thought. A few of them are more arrogant than you
Right.
thought. It's very interesting to see how they relate to you one-on-one. But yes, and that's been a great career. Several years ago, and Lester Watson, who's interim pastor at Donaldson Baptist Church, nominated me for a position on the Committee on Public Affairs with the Kentucky Baptist Convention, and that's been a number of years
Right.
ago, probably 12, 14 years ago. And that really, that was something I was really interested in, of working from the biblical perspective with government and interacting with our state leaders and trying to form and shape policy. Uh, I was then asked to be on the Western Recorder, which is a statewide Baptist newspaper, on their board of directors. I've been on there, I think, now 3 terms. But a few years ago, back in 2013, Don Mathis, who's former pastor at Southside, and Dr. Adam Greenway, who's chairman of the Billy Graham School of Evangelism at Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, approached me about would I be a candidate for president of the Kentucky Baptist Convention. And it absolutely floored me, as much as anything I've ever had happen,
Yeah.
because I never saw that coming. And I said, guys, y'all got to let me pray about this. I don't know. I mean, lay people are not, they don't do that. This mostly pastors who
Yeah.
do that. And but I was singing that was about 6 weeks later. I was singing a national newspaper meeting in Washington, and I just could not get that off my mind. I thought, what I have more passion about? And I thought about that, and I thought, I've really got more passion to do that than what I'm doing right now with the newspaper.
Wow.
And so that pretty much
That-
made
that-
up
that
my
was it,
mind.
yeah.
And I told them, and I said, now, guys, people find out I'm running, they'll run somebody against me, and I'll get beat, and that's fine. That's
Right.
fine. We'll give it a shot. But nobody opposed me, and so I was elected. And it was an incredible year. Got to travel to various places, spoke at a number of churches, preached at a number of churches, spoke at chapel at Clear Creek College in Eastern Kentucky, Bible College, and really got that seed started that there was more for me than that.
Right. Right.
So, as a result, of course, from that, I was named to a committee, actually chaired the committee on nominations for the Southern Baptist Convention, which when I was asked, I said, well, yes, I will. And I found out more about it, and I thought that committee, and I was the chairman of it, everyone in there, majority of people were pastors. There were some lay people, but we represented every state in the union, and we were to name the board of directors or trustees of Lifeway, of the International Mission Board, of the North American Mission Board, of all the Southern Baptist seminaries in the country. And it was an awesome task, but it was incredibly rewarding.
Sure.
And met people from all over the country that definitely influenced me. And so here a few. Actually, it was about early last year. We felt like the Lord was telling me my time in the newspaper was about to end, and so, and thankfully I was able to. I told our parent company back in late 2016 that I would be retiring.
Right.
And then I told my staff at the 1st of March, and that gave us that several months of transition time. But looking now to go into some ministry role, my wife has asked me, and I'm let me say how I want to define ask. She has advised me maybe
There you go.
that I've worked all my life and I need to take 2 months off, and that's what we're doing, and
That's
we're
great.
going to just enjoy our time together and enjoy our time with our grandkids. We've got one here, Preston, and then we've got 4 in Louisville, and then after that I'm looking at going into some being I know I'm called into some ministry role, just not sure right now what that is.
That's awesome. Let's talk about your fine family. Let's give them kudos because, of course, your wife Karen.
Yes.
And
Yes.
go ahead and let's give them a shout out and kudos to them because, like I said, it takes a lot of support to do what you have done.
Yeah, it does. And Karen's got really an interesting story, and I hate to be the one to steal her thunder here, but I'll tell you a little bit of it. She was an RN, straight out of Western, graduated at Western, got a job at Jenny Stewart, and she was 21 years old or so, and she was named after working on the floor. She was the ER supervisor.
Wow.
So here at that young age, she was supervising the emergency room, Jenny Stewart Hospital, now Jenny Stewart Medical Center. We moved to Princeton when Cindy, as I said, was 3 months old, and she had decided she would be a stay-at-home mom, which she did. So Cindy was 3 months old. John Mark was born 2 years later, and so she was a stay-at-home mom, did everything for us, and she was at our beck and call. If they needed something from school, she was the one that ran it, and I was working all the time. And so, in essence, we didn't know any better. We just thought that's the way life was, but she was really virtually a single mom because she was doing everything and did a fantastic job of doing that. John Mark was in the 8th grade, best I remember, and Cindy was about a sophomore, somewhere around that time period. And all she was doing was running for us, being our gopher, and she was known as Chip's wife and John Mark and Cindy's mom. And so she told me one day, she said, "I'm just going to go get a job." And I said, "Yeah, right." And so she went to interview with the home health agency here, and they hired her on the spot. And she thought, "I'm going to show them now." Well, we were all tickled to death.
Right.
Because that gave her a new focus where she wasn't worried about us. And she got she was so great in that job.
Yeah.
And we joke about it now. It became, instead of she being Chip's wife, I became
Karen's husband. Yeah.
And so I lost somewhat of my identity in that way, and that was great. But in her role of going in and visiting in homes and taking care of patients in homes, she knows more about this county, out in the county, than I do.
She can get you around some of the back roads, can't she?
She knows all those places, and had it'd probably be a great time sometime for her to tell some of the great stories that was pre-HIPAA days. So, but she had incredible relationships with people, and it really gave her a new focus, and it really was a ministry for her.
That's great.
And so she retired when I've got our grandson Preston Burrell here in the studio. She retired when Preston was born. He was born 11 years ago last week, and she retired, and she would keep him for a couple of days a week, and then his other grandmother, Louise Burrell, would keep him another 2 days. So that's been a great situation.
Yeah.
Our Cindy, of course, is the CFO of the plant board here. Had a job as internal auditor at Trover in Madisonville, and then they actually created a position here, and she applied for that. And so we're glad she's not making that drive to Madisonville every day. And her husband, Ivan, who's a chemical engineer at Calvert City, and they're very involved in the community. He's on site-based counsel. Cindy's on the free clinic. A number of other things they do in the community. Of course, very active at our church at Southside. In Louisville, John Mark, our son, and his wife, Karen, and they have 4 children.
Right.
We again, to poke a little fun at my wife, she was complaining for years. All my friends have grandchildren. I don't have any grandchildren. And I said, "Well, where do you think you're going to get any grandchildren?" I said, Cindy, of course, was in treatment, had melanoma, was on a clinical trial, and was told not to get pregnant. John Mark didn't even have a girlfriend, and she said, "What's your point? I just want some grandchildren." Well, we had Preston in 2006, and then they were able to adopt 2 from Ethiopia within John Mark and Karen, his wife, were able to adopt 2 from Ethiopia in a matter of 3 months. And then right after that, they decided they would have biological children, so they had one in that following December, and then had another one the next December.
Wow.
So in about 2.5 years, she got 5
You
grandchildren.
got blossomed up, didn't you?
So that made
As
her
they say.
retirement very rewarding, where she could spend time with them. But John Mark's in Louisville. His wife Karen's a clinical psychologist, has a doctorate there, has her own practice, is doing very well. She's known nationally for her work with adoption,
Wow.
and she's gone to conferences. Actually, she's gone even overseas for several trips related to her work. John Mark, they were in Uganda for almost a year as missionaries there, came home. John Mark is now pursuing a career in nursing. So
Well,
he's
good for
in
him.
nursing school, and I think that probably in medical missions, their heart is for
They're
outside
still
this
missions,
country.
yeah.
And so we truly think that, especially in the years ahead, they'll probably wind back up on the mission field, but they're very happy. Their kids are all doing great there. They're 15, and the other one will be 15 here in a couple of weeks, and then a 5 and a 6-year-old. So it's always interesting when those 4 are around.
I see pictures. I've seen pictures in the paper and on
Yeah.
Facebook, of course. Of course, you all are very blessed.
We are. We're very
you
blessed.
truly are, and I always love the pictures. And I hopefully we won't miss them. Hopefully we'll see them on Facebook of you and Karen in the whatever superhero of the of whatever superhero craze we were into.
Yeah.
into.
Yeah.
You guys were always
For their birthdays, we'd
Yeah.
always dress up as some kind of a superhero or some kind of a cartoon character. And we haven't done that for a couple of years, but I guess now we're going to have to restart that tradition. We saw some pictures the other day, and we always had a great
Have a good time
with
doing
that.
it, don't you?
Yes, we sure do. We have more fun than the kids do.
Oh, sure, yeah. I've seen those pictures and just said, man, that is what it's all about. Well, what a fabulous career you've had.
Thank you.
What a wonderful legacy to these kids and grandkids that you're showing them through example, and it must be just a fantastic feeling.
Well, it is, and people ask me about retirement, and I won't stay retired very long. I'll be active. I'm still thankfully.
Yeah, you're
fantastic.
Trilogy
health.
Performance Sports
Right,
is getting
yes.
you rolling in it.
Jesse
them
Oliver
are-
and Emily are great trainers out there, and,
Yeah.
and I feel
Give them a plug this morning.
feel great. And,
I need to
and-
go.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you, and I will give them a plug.
Yeah.
People have no
Why not?
idea. It's not just the physical work out there, but you are stimulated. You feel better mentally and emotionally.
Yeah.
It truly is a family out there. I know they gave me a little retirement gift, which
I saw that.
I never imagined anything like that, but it was so special. And when people that we work out with have issues, family issues, and health issues, everybody's there to support them. And
It's a fellowship, isn't it?
It is a
Yeah.
fellowship. We take some heat at church. Of course, I got Stan Hutcheson started to go out there. We've had a couple of guys say, "Yeah, y'all work out with women." Well, I'm going to tell you what: the women we work out with are strong women.
Yeah.
And but we have such a great time, and we've had a few. Now we've got, I think, another couple of men starting to come out there, and I don't know whether I ought to embarrass them or not, but Rick Williams just started
Good deal.
last Thursday, so we were glad to see Rick. And I'm working on a couple of other guys. So, but
What is his nickname, Preston? Slinky.
yeah,
Are you? He's Slinky.
I'm Slinky.
Oh my goodness.
A young
We
lady.
can have fun with that one.
Yeah, most people know. Many people here know Erin Harper. She's about a 22-year-old. She's a firecracker, and she works out with us. And she decided to give everyone names based on Toy Story. So of course it was a natural for Stan. He's Sheriff Woody.
Oh, there you go.
And
That's hilarious.
Erin and her family were visiting in church back a few weeks ago. It was Memorial Day weekend, and they were on the other side of the sanctuary from us. And so Karen and Erin are waving to each other, and Jeff, who is Jeff Harper, Erin's dad,
Yes.
said, "That woman over there is waving to you." And Erin just looked at him and said, "Oh, that's Bo Peep." Well, she named my wife Karen Bo Peep. And so we got all names.
That's
and,
hilarious.
Named Jesse, and Jesse just rolls his eyes when she calls him that. So she calls him Ken. He's the Ken doll. So
that is so
he
funny.
would definitely won't like me saying that
well,
on the air.
Well, that's okay. That's radio's supposed to be fun.
That's
It is
right.
fun. And
It is
so,
fun. But we have such a great time, and it's I've taken golf lessons before from Todd Trimble at the golf complex in Paducah, and my wife says he's more my psychiatrist than my golf pro, and because we wind up and talk about such great life lessons and things, and out there too, we have so much fun in doing it, and it is truly a family. So that's again one of those great things about Princeton.
It is.
I mean, that you can go to a place to have a workout, and yet you enjoy it because of the camaraderie.
And you look forward to going.
Yes.
Yeah. And then, hey, folks, if you want a cool nickname, get into shape, head to
Yes,
Trilogy
that's right.
Performance Sports.
We can definitely come up with a nickname for you. And I've seen the movie Toy Story with our grandkids, but I didn't remember Slinky, but they did. And of course, on the little retirement gift, they had the Slinky toy.
Yeah, and it's like a little dachshund dog, isn't it? And it's for the Slinky.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. A couple things before I let you go. I knew we'd fill up an hour, and I'm glad we did. I wanted to, and we're almost there. But let's talk about your Amos Award recently. You're only one of two Kentuckians, I think, to ever receive that award, and I bet that one floored you as well. But yet, let's and I've looked it up a little bit, when we did our news story on it. But I'll let you kind of tell folks about the Amos Award and how you think that came about.
Well, it really did floor me. I never saw that one coming either. That is
it's a newspaper award.
Yes, it's a newspaper award. National Newspaper Association gives at its convention each year. It gives 3 awards. The Amos Award is for either an active or retired newspaper person who has made significant contributions to the newspaper industry and to their community.
Right.
And they give another award, which is for the McKinney Award, which is for a woman who has distinguished herself in the newspaper profession. And then they give a Phillips Award, which is for someone who is under 35 years of age, trying to encourage youthful participation.
Right.
So I got the old man award, but it did truly for me. I never saw that coming.
Quite an honor.
It is an absolutely amazing honor. I never dreamed that I would be honored that way, that my peers in the newspaper profession would honor me in that way. And I am overwhelmed. I'm humbled. I certainly don't feel deserving of that, but it is a fantastic honor.
What a way to ride off into the sunset from the newspaper business with that honor. It really is. It's icing on the cake, I would think.
Yeah, I'll get that award in October in Tulsa at the convention. And I look at those people who've won it before me, and my goodness, the incredible contributions that they have made to this industry. The only other Kentuckian who has won it, it's been presented since, I believe, 1938. Been presented every year since then, so it's great, got great longevity. But a man named Max Heath, who's a very good friend of mine, Max won it in 1994, and Max is retired executive editor of Landmark newspapers, which own a bunch of newspapers: E-Town, Bardstown, a number, Cynthiana, Shelbyville, Campbellsville, and Max is. If you want to know anything about newspapers and how they're mailed and the postal work, he knows more about it than most of the postal employees do. And he is has great rapport with the Postmaster General, and Max is a great friend of mine. He and I made numerous Capitol Hill visits in Washington, D.C., trying to lobby for our industry. And so I'm very honored just to be in his, to be ranked among him. But yeah, only a second Kentuckian. It's a great honor. And again, I have this community and my family and my coworkers they're the ones that get the credit for it.
Well, big congratulations for that. And I guess as we kind of finalize and get wrapped up here, I had another question for you. And I guess it goes back to your journalism career. But out of all you've met dignitaries, you met famous people, you've interviewed people. tell us about some of your most memorable maybe interviews with somebody important or stories that you've covered. Let's talk about it as you look back a little bit. And I know there's just scores of, but is there a few that you can pick out that really just, man, come to mind as either someone you've interviewed or just a great story or that you've covered?
Well, knowing that my first love in the newspaper profession is sports, I immediately think of those things.
Right.
And, again, incredible opportunities. When I was in college at UK, of course, I was sports editor of the campus newspaper, and I got to go on a few trips with the basketball team, which is amazing.
That's neat.
Dan Issel, Mike Pratt, the late Mike Casey, Larry Steele had a great pro career. Just
being around those guys, I guess.
Around them, and of course, we were all pretty much the same age. Mike Pratt came to visit me several times when I lived in Hopkinsville, and I know I brought him to Princeton. And,
right.
My parents thought the greatest thing that ever happened. I took him by our house, and they couldn't wait to take my picture with him. And we went out and played golf at the country club with Al Giordano and Fleming Thornton, who was a Hoptown football coach, and great times like that. But I got to interview. I went on a trip with the UK basketball team when they played at LSU, and that was my junior year. And got to sit down in the stands there with Pete Maravich.
Oh, wow.
Pistol Pete. Pistol Pete and I are the same age. Of course, he's deceased now, but incredible. One of the greatest basketball players, I think, of all time. Great shooter and revolutionized the game with the behind-the-back dribble and pass. And here we were just sitting in the seats there just talking, and we were the same age, so we could really relate to each other.
That's really neat.
I was able to walk into pretty much any time I wanted to. I could walk into Adolph Rupp's office and talk with him.
And what was that like?
That was it. I was intimidated because people have heard Rupp speak. I've heard him. Could go to the practices. Practices were closed, but he let me in. And I've heard him berate players. And Terry Mills, who's Cameron Mills' dad, he just had him where he looked like a beat puppy dog.
Just ate him for lunch.
Just ate him up. I was in one practice, and, of course, Joe Hall was the assistant. Dan Issel, Rupp came up with this. It was a double pick on the low post for Issel to get a little baseline jumper, about a 10-foot baseline jumper. And Rupp was diagramming the play and telling him how to do it. And Joe Hall said, "Coach, we can't make that pass from that position." And Rupp said, "Yes, we can, and we will until we get it right."
Oh, man.
And they did. It was funny. When he blew that whistle in practice, that ball nobody better let a ball hit the floor.
So you held on to it.
And you held on to it. But I would go into it, and I had one advantage in that he and my grandfather were friends. They knew each other, and so that helped me. But I went into it always with great trepidation.
Sure.
And but he was always kind to me, nice to me, allowed me to go on those trips with them.
Awesome experience.
And yes, and I think of interviews you're going to have. I think here in the studio here in another month or so, one of the great interviews is Greg Smith.
Yeah.
And I think Greg's going to I think he was scheduled to be here. I'm not sure.
Well, he was, and I think I've heard, now I don't know this is true yet, but he might have to have some knee surgery, so I don't know if that's going to work out or not yet, but not sure. But yeah, I would love to hope that happens.
He is a great interview because Greg is.
And you got to see those guys.
I got to see him. Greg's 2 years older than me, so he's in that 71 age range.
Right.
And Greg was a senior when I was a sophomore at Caldwell County High School, and that was the year that we integrated.
Right.
And Greg was a guiding force, Greg and his family, but integration here went great.
Yes.
I mean, we had no problems. There was great respect, and
a lot of it had to do, I think, with both systems and with fine educators at Dotson School as well as here.
Right, and parents.
And the community
wanted to make it work.
That's right.
And Greg is such a great interview. I interviewed him 2 years ago, I guess, when the late Dwight Smith, was inducted into the Kentucky Basketball Hall of Fame. That was in Elizabethtown. I went to that, and Greg he's a treasure to interview. Of course, here's a guy from Princeton that was a starter on an NBA championship team. He started at forward at 6'4" on the Milwaukee Bucks when they won the 1970 NBA championship.
That's awesome.
Incredible.
It is.
Of course, Lou Alcindor, one of his good friends, was the starting center on that team.
Yeah.
And so that one, I've always enjoyed Judge Cunningham, those interviews. Mitch McConnell has always been a good one for me, a good person to interview. Brereton Jones was one when he was governor that we had a good close. My uncle, late uncle, was one of his best friends.
Okay.
And so I think that helped to make that. Boy, I could go on all day.
Sure.
You think of the famous people or the well-known people, but some of the greatest interviews are the people, just the average person.
Right.
And it's because of their stories are so great.
No doubt about it.
And
just like yours.
Well, it's interesting that, and we joke in our family. We finally convinced our daughter-in-law that Princeton is the center of the universe, because wherever you go, you can find some kind of a connection to Princeton.
And you write that in your column all the time, and there is no doubt about it that you are exactly right. If you don't have to search too hard sometimes either.
No, you don't. And I think of the many times we've been to Nashville Airport, and we'll see somebody either from Princeton, or we'll get into a conversation, and somebody will know somebody from Princeton or have a relative from Princeton, and speaks well of Princeton, and I love that. And it took our daughter-in-law, who is from Houston, Texas, and she kind of smirked when we said that, and she's finally come around, because in her travels,
she's a believer.
She would find out somebody say, she would, know Kentucky. Well, do you know anything about Princeton? And it's amazing, yet it's very encouraging and rewarding to hear those stories.
Yes, sir, it is. Well, what a fantastic career you've had, and I like to take these opportunities to have, especially you recently, this being fresh, but this is an archive, us talking about this, and you have so many things we didn't touch on, but just congratulations to you for a fantastic career. We are so appreciative of what you've done at the paper for this town and in your many acts, just as being part of this community. So hopefully this is that moment that we can thank you, and just so glad, and just wish you so much success in your next adventures. I know it's going to be adventurous and great, whatever you do.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you here, and I've appreciated your friendship back to our a long time, even prior to your banking days.
Yes, sir.
And
I about came to work for you one time.
I almost did. I almost had you convinced.
Yes, sir. You sure did, and I appreciated that potential opportunity as well, and that you thought enough of me to bring me on board.
Yeah, who knows what life would have been like, right?
There's no telling.
But thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
And I want to thank the community, because people, I'm out, and people will stop and say something to me, and that means more than anybody knows.
Yes.
So I'm very appreciative to everyone for their very kind words and thoughts.
Yes, sir. And we can't thank you enough, and thank this community. It's a great community to be a part of. And again, we expect to see great things out of Chip Hutcheson and the Hutcheson family, and whatever your endeavors are. We can't thank you enough, and wish you best of luck in the future, and congratulations on your great career and a wonderful retirement.
Well, thank you so much.
All right. My pleasure to welcome into the WPKY studios Chip Hutcheson. And hey, Preston, get over there and say hello to everybody. Preston's been in here patient for the last hour, and I got Preston Burrell in here. Preston, what are you up to today?
Nothing much, really.
Nothing much, really? You think it's nice and hot? You think you got a trip to a pool, maybe, or?
Probably baseball.
Awesome.
Because we lost our last All-Star tournament, so we're going to try to get it in Caldwell.
Awesome. Well, good for you, man. What position do you play?
Third base. I pitched some last game because we couldn't get out of an inning. We kept on walking.
Well, good deal. You got out of it, right?
I play third base, pitcher, and then hopefully they'll put me at catcher some. 'Cause
All
I played
right.
that in regular season.
Good deal. Well, congratulations to you. Good luck at baseball practice today. I'm glad you were here today to hang out with your grandfather here at WPKY.
Thanks.
Say hello to your mom now. She might be listening,
Hey,
and your
Mom,
dad. All right.
If you're listening.
All right. All right. That's Preston Burrell. He was our guest here, too, at WPKY Studios. We're just